Hello, you're very welcome along to another episode of the Tackle Sport podcast. It's Daniel here, joined once again by my brother Sean.
How's it going?
And yeah, Monday's episode, so it means we're going to review the weekend's action, Sean. A lot of sport to get through, so we're going to quit the small talk and get straight to it. I guess we're going to start with the Premier League. The timing should be in your episode description. And we're going to cover Premier League first, then and then move on to the Six Nations final weekend as well, and maybe just gloss over the golf with Padraig Harrington in contention there earlier on in the tournament in the Bermuda Championship, Sean. But Manchester United versus Arsenal. What were your overall thoughts on that game? Because I guess coming into the game, Ole Gunnar and United were the team in form, and it just kind of flips. It's mad. Football's a bit mad like that in the sense that Arteta was under pressure for not playing good enough football or exciting enough football, and all of a sudden, a solid base and a 1-0 win away from home to a top 16 for the first time since January 2015.
Yeah, and I think Arteta will be delighted at the fact that he's been away to Old Trafford, been away to the Etihad, and been away to Anfield, and sits in fifth or sixth position, and only 4 points back, I think, from Liverpool at the top of the league. It's not an easy fixture list, and I think what will annoy Arteta is that there's been moments in all 7 of the games that they probably could have won, and they just let sort of the game peter out. But I think he knew what Manchester United wanted to do. He nullified that. I thought his midfield too. When I saw before the game, I was a little bit unsure. I kind of liked the fact that Partey was starting. I mean, you paid 45 million. You want to see what he's like in the big game, and he was absolutely magnificent and ran the show. And Mohamed Al Nene is probably that little bit, ball of energy beside Partey, because Partey, he's quick and he's good with running with the ball, but you don't want him doing all the donkey work in and around midfield, and that's what Al Nene did. And I think he just struck the balance well. Rob Holding was outstanding at the back, and Gabriel, and it's sort of, Arteta sort of stumbled across something at 5 at the back late last year, and he's kind of stuck with it because he knows at the moment that's what he can do. You'd imagine in 6 months, 8 months, he might move to a 4 at the back once he's got, Tierney, Gabriel, another centre back, and Bellerin. He might move to a 4, but at the moment he's liking the 5. And I was ready to, Manchester United were brutal. Let's be honest, that there's something seriously drastically wrong with that club. Whether it's Ole, whether he's out of his depth, whether it's the players. I mean, for the whole match, Gary Neville was banging on about Pogba. They paid 80 million for Pogba. He was in their academy. They know all about Paul Pogba. They should know how to play to his strengths. And he's such an enigma at this stage that now maybe it is time to move on. Look, he's a really good player. He's got so much quality on the ball. He does have a tendency to give away a lot of penalties, whether it's handball, whether it's some corners, that sort of the dangle of a leg at Bellerin and he was sort of going nowhere, probably epitomises Paul Pogba at Manchester United. And, for all that Arsenal are really solid, I don't think they had to really, if you like, put on too much of a sweat defensively. I think there was a chance for Greenwood in the first half. Yes, they call, it kind of calls a little bit at the end when the pressure comes on. But overall, if you're a Manchester United fan watching that, you have to be really, really disappointed and, wonder how long this is going to keep going on. I think Tim Cahill made an unbelievable point on Sky Sports at the end of the game. People might have missed it because the Tottenham game had just started, but he said the problem with Manchester United is their lack of identity, and he's absolutely spot on. The problem when you spend big chunks of money and you use 3 or 4 different managers and you try and get something, you end up with a lot of deadwood. So Fred wasn't Ollie signing these 50 million. You've got Pogba, who wasn't Ollie signing. You've got, Luke Shaw, Maguire, who he was. And then all of a sudden you're left with a team of sort of players who play different formations and different style of plays. And that's, ultimately, Ollie's got that problem, but he's at the, if you like, one of the biggest clubs in the world, and he's kind of got to sort that out soon. But the signings they're buying, Cavani, does that mean Ollie wants his team to press really high? Because can Cavani do that at the age of 33? Probably not. He brought they brought in Donny van de Beek, who doesn't start, and I think he would have been suited to that right side of the diamond instead of McTominay. And I think the problem with at the moment as well in Manchester United is that they look at someone like Fred and they think, oh, he's done really well recently. He's been quite good. He's not going to win you a Premier League. And Roy Keane got that spot on. And that's some of the problems. Lindelof and Maguire, we spoke about at the start. of the year in the show, that the two of them, they're okay, but they're not going to get Manchester United to where Manchester United fans, pundits, and the hierarchy of the club think they should be, and that ultimately is a huge problem. And it's another disappointing result at home, and it just probably shows you how disgracefully bad Frank Lampard set up his team not to beat them away from home.
It's interesting you mentioned the Sky Sports pundits. I thought like Tim Cahill made a good point, and then I also thought Roy Keane made a good point in the sense as well. Now, Roy Keane's very old school, so a lot of people might turn up their nose when Roy Keane says this group of players going to let Ollie down. But it does seem this group of players consistently for the last 3 or 4 years are put in a good performance and do it for a couple of weeks, like Roy was saying, and then they almost feel like they have it now, they've made it. And that was definitely a lot of the rhetoric after Leipzig, and it is easy to get caught up on it. I know we had our Premier League preview on Thursday, or Premier League predictions preview, but there was no real kind of counter argument because United were very good against Leipzig. They actually seemed to have stumbled upon this diamond formation, and people were kind of getting their hopes up on that. But like you said, like these group of players will throw it out. Tim Cahill made a good point, and then the identity. It's just the same old problems with Manchester United going forward all the time.
Yeah, well, Leipzig, yes, they were a Champions League semi-finalists. They've lost their biggest threat in team of Werner, and defensively
they had started, but the Bundesliga very well. I think.
Yeah, they are the top of the Bundesliga, and I looked at the fixtures they played, and I think the only good team they beat up until Wednesday was Leverkusen, were fourth. The rest, I think, was Schalke, Mainz, and there was another couple of teams in there that were down the bottom. I think Mainz and Schalke are footing up the Bundesliga at the moment, but defensively, Leipzig in the last 20 minutes were a disgrace, and out and out disgrace. They played really well in the first half at all, and arguably if they had a bit more of an attacking threat, they would have scored. But defensively at the end, I mean, I was questioning whether it was match fixing there with the last 20 minutes, because
it was really bad. It was shocking to watch. Yeah, I do agree with you. I think most people. I think the problem was, I think with United was Rashford had just come on and scored a hat trick. I think it was the fact Rashford has gone on and played unbelievable. Yeah, I get it from both sets of fans, but I thought they were shocking. I don't think anyone can argue with how bad that defending is if you want to watch the highlights of that last 20 minutes again.
And Cavani came off the bench, and arguably, he could have scored. I know he didn't score, but he could have had a hat trick. I mean, that was just the nature of the last 20 minutes. And Manchester United, if you like to stumble across the diamond, I don't necessarily think it suits them. What's their biggest threat offensively? It's the pace of Greenwood, it's the pace of Rashford, and the sort of the guile of a Fernandes. And they just didn't use that in the second half. And maybe Arsenal didn't allow them to use it. In the first half, I thought they were a little bit more of a threat on the half turn when Rashford got the ball. And that was something that Arsenal did really well, and Gabriel did well, and would stop the ball coming into Rashford and cut out his supply and get tight on him and aggressive on him. And that's the way to play Manchester United. You can't allow him to turn and then run at your defence when they've got options in Greenwood. There was people talking about, Gary Neville said on Sky, Sancho seems like a big mistake by the board not getting him. I don't necessarily agree with this thing that it's the players. I mean, a lot of blame has to go to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I mean, that's part of the job in modern football, keeping the players grounded, making sure they know what you want them to do. And this just seems like every couple of weeks we talk about the players, or the manager letting them down. I mean, when United won those, games on the bounce at the end of last season and ran into Champions League football, everyone was saying Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and Bruno Fernandes. I mean, Ole was getting the praise then, and he seems to, because maybe he's a United legend, maybe because a lot of his mates work in the media, there isn't this, push towards question marks on him. And I think the only few people who put pressure on him at times has been Jamie Carragher, and a little bit of time recently has been Roy Keane. And I think pressure will start to come from Ole Gunnar, because it's just not acceptable. He's been there 100 games. There's no clear identity. There's no way of playing. I know it's a romantic story, and Man United fans will always love Ole Gunnar for 99 and for, the career he had at Manchester United. But the club isn't getting any closer to a Premier League. Brian Giggs said during the weeks it could be another, 15, 20 years before United win a title. Look, Arsenal are in that road at the moment. Liverpool had their 30 years. And, for a club of Manchester United size, I know I've probably seen the same at Liverpool at the time, when they were 10 years without a league title in the Premier League era. And all of a sudden, you're 20 years down the line and you're even no closer to winning a Premier League. And that's sort of the rut I personally think Manchester United are in. To not attack that game at home, really, they were placid. They you could tell Ole Gunnar didn't want Arsenal scoring on the break, or didn't want them dominating on the break. And I think that Arsenal midfield of Elneny and Pardy, to have that easy a task against, if you like, four midfielders in the diamond, or if you want to say the two of them or the three of them, I think they just battered them. And
Yeah.
that's,
Well, let me just come in, Sean, just on the last point, because I do think this is an important point to flesh out before we move on. So you mentioned identity. I think it's a common theme a lot of journalists and other people watching football have saying is the massive problem for Manchester United. When people say identity, what has Arteta done with Arsenal that is more of an identity than United? Because United fans might get frustrated when people we kind of dismiss the diamond and it's not a clear identity. People may look at Arteta can go to a back four, back five. What's different that Arteta's doing there that makes him more of an identity than, say, Manchester United trying out new formations? Do you know what I mean?
I don't necessarily think it's set in stone with your formation or what attacking players you play or what midfield you set up nowadays. I think it's your commitment to playing out from the back. We see now with Arteta in the FA Cup. We even saw, how easy Arsenal were able to play out from the back. I mean, it's not as if Rob Holding is the most comfortable on the ball, and at times he made one or two little errors, one or two heavy touches, and it just wasn't capitalised on. I think it's that. I think it's the commitment to playing out from the back. I think it's the commitment to pressing high up the pitch. It's to keeping your shape on the pitch. I think at times Arsenal and it was a brilliant interview Daniel McDonald had with Brian Gartland of Dundalk, where Brian Gartland talked about Arsenal's shape, and they said they don't necessarily play with a number 10, whereas a lot of teams, Chris Shields or Dundalk would be one of the busiest players on the pitch. Chris Shields didn't really, in that sense, have to be busy in there. There wasn't little intricate passes. Arsenal like to play a lot from the side and the wings and sort of bring it in from there and create opportunities from there, little balls down the side for Saka or Bellerin or Tierney. And I think that's sort of you can see something that Arteta wants going forward. Necessarily, like I said, it could be 5 at the back, could be 4 at the back. Just he's kind of stumbled on that 5. But at the moment, United, I mean, when they play out from the back, I mean, there's different positions. Fred at times, there's a lot of times where it would be Maguire, Lindelof, and then Fred would be in the middle of the three when they're trying to play out from the back, and there's no one ahead of the ball, and you've got Fernandes who's 25 yards ahead. You might have McTominay who's 5 or 6 yards to the side, and that's just so easy for Arsenal to defend in a press when you're literally seeing the game in front of you, when you can see Fred and you're not worried about who's over your shoulder in the pocket, because everyone is on everyone, if you like, and they're all kind of pressed looking at the ball. Whereas, if you've got runners going in behind, if you've got runners going in between the midfield and the centre backs, that's where danger is caused. And Manchester United just don't seem to really have a grasp. But they sort of live for the days where a team will dominate them. They can put in Maguire, can head the ball. Lindelof looks improved in that side of the defence. Headers and clearances, and then the ball kind of falls to Fernandes and Martial, Greenwood, Rashford on the break, and that's when United cause teams problems. And that's great for games in Europe or games against big sides, if you like. But if a team sits in against you, like we saw with Crystal Palace and Hitch on the break, I mean, it doesn't even have to be one of the top teams in the league to damage Manchester United. And United really look for that early goal, and if they can get an early goal, it really helps them in the game. But at the moment, that's the idea of lack of identity. Manchester United, there, you wouldn't even say they press well against Arsenal. They didn't. If you're playing a defender like Rob Holding, who Rob Holding played very well, but like I say, he's not the best on the ball. Every game you got to be thinking we could get 1 or 2 little half chances against them to press them and stop them and put them under pressure. And especially with the goalkeeper Leonard, there was a couple of times even when there was a couple of little heavy touches, and if you like, he gave that half chance to United. They just didn't take it. And that's sort of everything that is wrong with Manchester United. There's no set plan. There's no, when the going gets tough, they revert back to what they know, their principles. They're going to play out and back, or they're going to press, and all these under serious pressure. And it's the one thing we haven't seen in 100 games now.
Absolutely. Well, listen, it'll be interesting to see if going forward how that's going to all play out. But look, we're going to go ahead to the Tottenham Brighton game. Sean, can Spurs win the league?
On that performance, probably not. Okay. I thought Brighton for 30 minutes in that first half had a penalty more by far the side, and probably for 60 minutes. Maybe the fact that they won and they won the one playing bad, if you like, and people thought that's a sign of champions, maybe. But I mean, the penalty is honestly, I think it's one of the worst decisions I've ever seen.
Yeah, just play this out a little bit. I still don't really get how it was given. Do you know what I mean?
So
It's
the,
such a not a 50-50 call. I thought it was definitely a free out, but sometimes you may see that in midfield given, but you cannot really. It's such a big call, like a penalty. You can't really give a penalty for that based on your opinion that he was taken out as opposed to Kane leading into Lallana, wasn't there, whoever it was.
Yeah, so the ball comes into the box, and Brighton first of all don't fail to deal with it properly, and I think it's Basuma gets a half clearance, and the ball falls to the edge of the box, and Harry Kane is the goal side of Lallana, who's coming back, and Kane has one look at Lallana, kind of jogs a little bit to the right, has another look at Lallana, and waits for Lallana to jump, takes the contact, and sort of Lallana is in midair, hits Kane, Kane's gone down, the two of them fall on top of each other. The referee initially gave a free kick because he thought it was outside the box. Then he went over and got overturned. Jamie Carragher, I think it was in the West Ham game, said the same about Kane to Cresswell down near the dugout. Harry Kane does this. It's one of his things. It's one of his ways of winning free kicks. He's so good at winning free kicks. But the notion of giving a penalty for someone who A, doesn't have control of the ball, B, it's a 50-50 ball, C, he makes no contact of playing the ball, and D, he exaggerates the contact and falls down and wins a free kick or a penalty. I turned on the game because, like I said, I was watching the coverage of the Sky end of the Arsenal game. I think it was about 14 or 15 minutes into the game, so it was about 7:30 when I turned it on. And I saw the commotion about VAR, and I was like, surely they're not giving this a penalty. And all of a sudden, Kane steps up and scores. I honestly couldn't believe it. And Mourinho said about VAR at the end, he's dead right. The Brighton goal should have been disallowed. Højbjerg gets tackled, gets fouled, 100% a foul. Brighton don't deserve to score from that. They get the goal. And the referee goes over to the VAR monitor, Graham Scott, and stays with his on-field decision, which is even worse, I think, than giving the first decision.
Well, it's funny that that's what
penalty.
we kind of want refs to back themselves up if they get to that monitor, and then the one time they do it is for something that they really should have kind of overturned themselves.
But it's shocking that, and the fact that he's able to referee a Premier League game after the first of all given the penalty, which is which actually personally I think many people should say it's a free out because Kane's not looking for the ball, he doesn't have control of it, and he jumps and sort of hits Lallana in the air, if you like, and Lallana comes down awkwardly, and he's kind of lucky in the sense of Lallana for himself that he comes down on Kane and doesn't get a bad injury. And the second one, I think, is probably worse, to be honest. The fact that you can go to the VAR monitor and stick with your own decision for a blatant foul. And Graham Scott's going to be probably refereeing I'd imagine a championship game in a few weeks because of that performance in the Premier League, because you can't have two decisions that bad. Tottenham being title challengers, maybe. They did well to win the game. Defensively, I still think they've huge issues. Brighton should have had another penalty, or should have had a penalty. Doherty held back Trossard in the box, more of a penalty than the Kane one. You could argue, if you like, it might have been not a huge amount of contact, or maybe Trossard goes for it a little bit, tries to buy the penalty, if you like. Whereas we saw lots of cases of that happening anyway in the Premier League this weekend. Tottenham, they've a decent points tally. They've got Europa League football, and I think Mourinho's going to play a B team up until the latter stages, or until they need a few wins. And maybe that rest at the moment is doing them good. Bale actually looked sharp, to be honest. I didn't think he'd look this sharp. Took his goal really well. And, when you've that sort of threat coming off the bench at the moment, or even bringing a Moore off the bench, or a Lamela, because of Bale, look, they've got something going for them going forward. But I think to bridge the gap between Liverpool and City, and yes, we said the point difference isn't going to be, or the points isn't going to be as high, they still need to get up to finishing third in the league before I think they can go anywhere further at the moment. And I'd really be worried for that defense at the moment. It looks all over the place.
Coming to a team then top of the league, once again, Liverpool. So it seems after all the commotion, all the injuries, they're actually sit top of the league. I thought it was a bit mad myself. How do you think they're fared? I think it was another massive win from home. I don't know if that's sustainable to do that all season, to beat these teams 2-1. Yes, they were doing it the odd time last season, but predominantly they were 2-0 wins and 3-0 wins and 3-1 wins. Instead, it's more 2-1 scoring in the last 10 minutes. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. Look, we said West Ham would cause them problems. I think Klopp knew what West Ham were going to do. Antonio's a huge loss for West Ham. Of course, he is. He gives you so much more than Haller. I mean, Haller just looks, like he's not interested in playing football. And like we said, we knew they caused them problems, but Liverpool fronted up to that really well, I thought, and dealt with it so much more better than they did against Sheffield United. And your man, Nat Phillips, did okay on debut. I don't know where the man of the match award came for him. He did okay on debut. I think it was just sort of he's on debut. Let's give it to him. And Jota changed the game. I mean, Liverpool were really, really poor. Firmino's in a really bad run of form at the moment. You would be a little bit worried for a starting position. I mean, because if Jota plays, he can sort of play anywhere in that front three. It becomes a little bit more fluid. And Salah can come in, Mane can come in, and they can sort of play as a really more fluid front three, which actually at the moment might suit them. Whereas Firmino is just really struggling at the moment. And considering the big game coming up next weekend against Manchester City and the big game away in the Champions League, it's a huge week for Liverpool. I think if they come through these two games, Atalanta have caused teams problems. And they score, I think it was a 2-0 draw against Ajax, so it was a high scoring game. Anyway, they can cause teams problems. They're, sort of everyone's favourite Champions League team from last season. But Manchester City on Saturday, I mean, if Liverpool let City win, yes, City have a game in hand. I think they're a few points back, but if they let City win, all of a sudden that sort of opens it. Where at the moment, if they can come through these two games with a win in midweek and a win against City, all of a sudden we're sitting here going, Liverpool just seem to grind out results. Like I said, is it sustainable for the whole season to do 2-1 wins at home to the likes of West Ham, to the likes of Sheffield United? Probably not. They might lose a couple of games, but like we said, the points aren't going to be as high, so they can afford that. And if they win the majority of those games 2-1 or 1-0, Klopp will be happy. But it's a huge testing week for Liverpool, and that game against Manchester City is going to be huge. And I think Pep Guardiola is going to know it. I think he's going to set up a little bit differently. I think that the Sheffield United game, they're a lot more covered at the base in defence. Kyle Walker's not pushing high and wide as much as he used to. He's sort of in a more recovery position on the half turn. And, Sheffield United don't necessarily have the quickest counter-attack in the league. Yet he was sort of still in a more central position. Laporte and Diaz, I mean, they look really good at the back. And I'd say Guardiola is counting his lucky stars that they should be around for the Liverpool game. And, it should be a really good game, but it's a huge game already. I know we speak about, the title challenge of both teams. I think if Liverpool win this, it sort of knocks a lot from Manchester City and kind of knocks a lot of the positives they've had from the Champions League and the couple of games in the Premier League, and sort of just starting to feel their way back from the Champions League semi-final loss, if you like, or the quarter-final loss to Lyon. And they're just sort of picking it up a little bit, and it's going to be a huge test of both sides, and defensively for both sides. I think it's going to be a really interesting game.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liverpool have a 5-point lead against City, so we City have that game in hand. So it could go anywhere from 8-point lead after the game to 2 points. Games in hand, very important too. We've got maybe 2 minutes, Sean, if you want to touch on Steve Bruce or Southampton, or where do you want to go just for the final kind of wrap up with the Premier League coverage? A couple of big wins there for Newcastle and Southampton.
Yeah, huge win for Southampton. Villa. I just have one gripe with the Villa team, right? Everyone looks at Tyrone Mings as a sort of a hard man. He's
Sorry, you said Tyrone
Mings.
You said Tyrone Mings. I thought we were going straight to Gal there. You were segueing there. Sorry, go on.
No, Tyrone Mings. Right, everyone has. I've a gripe with him from the weekend. Everyone thinks that he's one of the hard men in football. He tackles hard. He puts in heavy challenges. He puts himself about. He's loud. He's vocal. He's a leader. For that goal, for the second free kick from Ward-Prowse, he doesn't jump. He doesn't jump. Konza jumps beside him. He doesn't jump, and he lets the ball go past him. If he jumps, he takes it on the head. He stops the goal going in. It's 2-0 at the time. Aston Villa can come back from it. Yeah, you could say it's really close, and they want to. Mings wants to stay low in case Ward-Prowse whips it under his feet. Sort that out before the wall. Get someone that come underneath it. Don't have Konza jumping if you're going to stay on the ground. It's pointless. And he doesn't jump, and he costs his team the goal. And about 3 minutes before that, he puts a heavy tackle on Walker Peters. Now, he won the ball. It was fine, and you could kind of sense he was a little bit, pumped up, if you like. I mean, that is unforgivable not to jump in the wall. I don't know. There's a YouTube channel out there called GK, the Cycling GK with Ben Foster, and it gives you a brilliant insight into goalkeeping, into the championship where he is at Watford. And one of the games he was talking, it was the last couple of minutes, and the opposition had a free kick, and he was roaring at his team to take one in the mush, take one in. That's leadership, if you like. Stopping the ball becoming a threat. Like, I mean, Foster could save it, could ricochet anywhere, and it goes in. The fact you're 2-0, you were 2-0 down at the time, and he's not taking one in the head. He sort of just standing there, and the ball kind of just goes over his head, if you like. That was my gripe with him, because everyone looks at him as a hard man. Sometimes being a hard man is doing the hard things and taking one in there, and winning that ball from the corner like Phillips did in the 90th minute. That sort of, if you like. And then I'll move on to Steve Bruce. Just keeps doing it. I kind of thought Everton would struggle. I thought the team he picked was not good. I think they didn't have enough pace in the team. Yes, we spoke. They're missing Coleman and Digne, huge losses.
And Rodriguez and
Digne's
Richarlison, so they're missing like possibly four there. It's four of their starting lineup, but four of their best, I'd say 6-7 players. In fairness to Everton.
Yeah, exactly. And you could see that they didn't create anything really from their fullbacks. And I'm surprised he didn't start Iwobi, because yes, Iwobi's not the best, but he can sort of create chances in the end, and everything was sort of played in front of Newcastle. There was no balls going down the channels, because every time Calvert-Lewin went down the channel, there was no options. And I think, if Steve Bruce could have asked you to play any way, it would have been the way Everton played, and they didn't mix it up. And Callum Wilson on the break gets a couple of goals, and the penalty was probably a little bit fortunate. It was a penalty, but it was just, really poor from Andre Gomez. And when you bring Fraser on off the bench, he's going to create something. And Callum Wilson with 2 goals. I hope he's in everyone's fantasy teams. I hope Steve Bruce is, in a lot of people's, ideas at the moment. He's doing a wonderful job. Yeah, he could be going for manager of the month or manager of the season. I'm not sure, but no, not a brilliant result for Newcastle. And big plus that, yes, Shelby's out at the moment. Isaac Hayden was on the bench, but Jeff Hendrick looked really good at sort of the deepest lying central midfielder for Newcastle, and sort of has found a role there that he might be able to play in international football as one of the deeper centre midfielders rather than a box-to-box. And he got on a lot of ball and sort of, 1 or 2 passes to sort of open up Everton, if you like, and get the fullbacks on the ball. And I was really impressed with Jeff as well.
And Jordan Pickford getting dropped.
Yeah, I saw a couple of people say maybe it was because it's Newcastle and he's a Sunderland fan, a huge Sunderland fan. He's got history against Newcastle. Maybe the game is too much. Be interesting to see next week what happens. But no, yeah, Pickford is definitely under pressure, and I'd say if there was a better keeper than Olsen, he'd be gone earlier.
Yeah, and I guess I get the similar vibe of Joe Hart and City. I could struggle. I could see Jordan Pickford struggling to get back as that Everton team full stop, and Ancelotti making a priority to get a proper keeper in, if needs be. But yeah, so that's the guy then. It would lovely Tyrone Mings. Tyrone Mings to Tyrone. Sean Donegal Tyrone. How did you find that game? What were your thoughts on it overall? Is there a potential All-Ireland Championship in Donegal?
No, I don't think there is. I thought Tyrone threw it away, if I'm being honest. And I'd say another couple of weeks of sort of playing this more, aggressive style of football, if you like, maybe offensively, especially in that first half, a bit more possession than maybe they're used to, if you like, would have helped. I mean, to how they didn't win that game, all things considered, especially after Canavan's goal, they sort of, if you like, went back to their old ways of sitting back. They didn't use McKenna well in that second half at all. I don't think he got on any ball, missed a free as well when the game was close. And full credit to Donegal, if you like, they attacked the game a lot more. Conditions were really, really bad, but the goal in the first half is unbelievable. Sean Patton's kick out falls to Morgan, I think, and then the run from Langan is unbelievable, and it's just a sucker punch for Tyrone, especially when Tyrone were on top at that stage and creating all the chances, and Donegal just hit them with a sucker punch and got themselves into the game. And yeah, I think that there probably is a bit more from Donegal, and we didn't see a huge amount of their potent full forward line of Brennan, McBrearty, Murphy, but I thought it was really good without doing a huge amount. Maybe if we see a little bit more from that, if the conditions suit them a bit more, if it's a drier pitch, a harder pitch, they could maybe do a little bit going forward. But I don't think that they're up at the level of a a Kerry or a Dublin. I don't think many teams are. Maybe Mayo have the ability to get to that level. Who knows? Donegal are going to find it tough to get out of Ulster. I mean, Cavan put in a really good performance, and there's going to be teams that are going to fancy themselves. I know Donegal are favourites going into the game, favourites for Ulster, but I think a lot of teams will kind of fancy a crack at Donegal as well.
Yeah, and a word on Tyrone and Mickey Harte. You mentioned it was similar to Arsene Wenger. I think that's a common enough analogy people have used over the years, and we saw eventually that ends. I probably went on a little bit too long. Is this Mickey Harte experiment strong word? Is this Mickey Harte journey going on? Is he maybe got too much power up there? Is that kind of a bit harsh to say? I think a lot of people in the GA would probably think that. What another people what tends to happen with these Mickey Harte situations is one camp and the other. Where would you kind of head on that? Do you think it was time to go now? Should he have gone 5 years ago, or should he? Is he still capable of building a team? And a good enough team attacking wise to win All Ireland Championships, which is the goal for Tyrone, particularly the investment they put in GA up there in recent years, including their centre and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know if he is, say, the right man, but the fact that he's been there so long, especially in Gaelic games, because it's an amateur setting, because it's been roughly the same players for the last 6 or 7 years, it's going to be hard for whoever comes in to switch it and sort of change the mindset, change what has been done. What, for example, small things like where you train, what you do before training, where you stay before a game, all these sort of stuff that are sort of intrinsically linked with Mickey Harte over the last, 16, 17 years. I think it's coming to the stage where, if he does stay on another year and he gets another full crack at it, which I think he will, he's got to evolve a lot more than Mickey Harte always seems to be like a couple of years behind everyone, and a couple of years behind the game and sort of the tactical element of the game. What he's done there, and 3 All Irelands, beating Kerry in the 3. It's unbelievable that sort of the dominance in Ulster for a few years, the players that he's had, and the players he developed into, and everything that's happened, with Cormac McAlillan, his personal life, Mickey, it's an unbelievable story, the charityness of him, and everything that he's done for Gaelic and Tyrone. It just seems that it's just going to keep on running for as long as, he's still there, and he's got to evolve next year. He's got to use McKenna better. Cathal McShane, Dara Canavan looks a really good player, really exciting player with a bit of quality. And he's just got to use those players better. And a couple of years ago, you would say Tyrone probably lacked the forward line. I mean, Peter Harte didn't get on any ball. And he's someone that carried Tyrone for the last 4 or 5 seasons. If him or McKenna got on a bit more ball in that second half, then we'd be sitting here and Tyrone would be winning, and all of a sudden you'd be thinking, oh, Mickey Harte could win an All Ireland this year, which I thought. And they did. I personally think they threw it away and they didn't play enough. And yeah, Mickey Harte either needs to evolve, or you might see him maybe move on, and who knows.
But see, the frustration the frustrating with what you're saying, Sean, is this is the same thing you could have said 5 years ago. I think there was a defeat in Killarney, or maybe it was Tralee, in the championship in the qualifiers around 5 years ago. It was a big day for Kerry. I think Kerry were the only one that really cared about that result. They won a qualifier game against Tyrone. I think a lot of people said Mick Harte should probably have gone then, or around those years. I think he's guilty, similar to the Wenger situation, is of overachieving early on in his career. I know he had an amazing group of players, but to win 3 All Irelands, win any county, is phenomenal, yet let alone Tyrone. So I think he's a victim of overachieving initially, and he's probably underachieving now, especially in the last 5-6 years, because they have had a team capable of being at least third favourites in every single All Ireland over the last 3 or 4 years, and they just haven't really delivered. They got to that All Ireland final against Dublin, massively disappointed. They had the All Ireland semi-final against Dublin when they were also massively disappointed, I think the year before, 2017. It's just big games. They don't seem to have enough attacking threat when it really comes to them. Like you said, they had the game not won, but before the Donegal goal, they really they were in a, like, give that position to turn on the start of the game. You've got to kick on from there. You can't just retreat into your shell. And maybe they almost did that subconsciously. They weren't necessarily doing that on purpose. But yeah, like I said, I think he's a victim of overachieving, and now he's actually underachieving with those players. And I think you've got to be a bit ruthless. I know it's an amateur organisation, but I think that almost makes it more important. You can't just have someone in the same role for 10, 15 years, especially if he's not delivering the results.
Yeah, that was 2012, that qualifier. So, think back 8 years, the talk has been about this. I think they had the game in their hands after the Canavan goal, and they've just sort of retreated, like you said. There was some outstanding performances from Tyrone. Frank Burns, he was sort of everywhere. Ronan McNamee, I thought, was good. There was disappointment in, Peter Harte and Conor McKenna at times. And look, yeah, Tyrone I suppose the longer Mickey Harte stays on, the harder it's going to be to transition. But I just think he will get another year at it. So you've got to think, right, can he evolve a little bit more? Can he spend a bit more time with the players that he has, the players coming through? I mean, Tyrone have had really good pedigree at underage in terms of winning minors and under 21s and sort of being, the standout team in Ulster in that sense, if you like. I know Derry had a couple of years where they won and they got to an All-Ireland final on minor. But I still think that the Tyrone, the players that produce, and I think a huge plus is going to be Conor McKenna, and he stays next year, which is likely the way he talks about Gaelic games. He's just happy to be back in Ireland, and whether he commits to the county panel and they sort of can build a team around him and Peter Harte, Canavan, guys like that. And I was really disappointed with Peter Harte. I mean,
Yeah, you're not the only one,
I thought
Sean.
Joe Brady.
Yeah, a lot of people. It was a common theme after the game. A lot of people disappointed overall with his performance.
Yeah, look, he sort of played anywhere for Tyrone at times, wherever they've needed him. He's gone in full forward. He's been centre forward. I mean, he has carried Tyrone. He's been probably their best player. But I think with the introduction of McKenna, they've got a bit more threat, like I said, with McCurry and Canavan inside. Where is Peter Hart's best position now? I mean, do they play him back at centre back? I think they've got that fine at the moment. Tiernan McCann, I thought, was very disappointing at wing back. Look, does a lot of hard yards, won a few turnovers, but in possession, I mean, he shot a couple of horrendous wides. The other wing back from Tyrone, I forget his name, the 23-year-old, he looks a very good player. Again, had a couple of bad wides, and all those sort of stuff eats in, and Peter Harte next year is going to have to find a new position for himself. And we're still looking at Tyrone as if they have the players. They have the players to compete with most county teams. They just seem to be a level or two off Dublin and Kerry, and maybe even Mayo at the moment.
Yeah, and I think maybe that ultimately comes to the management. Go on, sir.
Yeah, and yet Mayo at Division 2, but you still think Mayo at this year could cause teams threat just because of the sort of not the style, if you like, but the sort of the pedigree they've had over the last couple of years and running them close, and they sort of just seem to give you a little bit more confidence than this Tyrone side. Maybe that's down to the management.
Yeah, Mayo. I guess with Mayo, they usually struggle with getting through Connacht in the last few years. So I think this Galway game, knockout game, is going to be a cracker. Like it's how big a game that is. Those two counties can go from getting knocked out to All-Ireland contenders, similar to Donegal Tyrone game. But yeah, the interest. I reckon Mickey Harte will stay on. I don't think many people expect that to resign. But maybe after this year being a short year and stuff, there's possibilities there. So the other Ulster game was Monaghan Cavan, Sean. What an absolutely unbelievable finish to this game. It was a bit of a mad game, I guess. Conor McManus, some absolutely cracking scores. There's a lot kind of happening in this game, but anyway, Cavan won it after extra time in sensational scenes. Yeah,
it felt weird watching a game on a Saturday, with coverage starting at 12:15. It sort of felt a little bit weird, like you were watching a prerequisite for something. I suppose it was a really good game of Ulster football. Two managers that are sort of, if you like, Mickey Graham's under pressure there at Cavan, relegated to Division 2, but he spoke afterwards about Championship was their focus this year, relegated to Division 3.
I was just going to say,
yeah, and their focus has sort of been switched towards Championship football, and they were, I thought they were the better team. I'll be honest. Yes, Monaghan threw it away at times, but I mean, Cavan were all almost, if you like, always sort of in control. They never really had to do something that you never felt like Cavan were really chasing that game and making, rash decisions like it would someone chasing it. And they sort of just took their time. Galligan was unbelievable. The midfielder that came on, Garrod McInerney, I think the centre forward, he was outstanding. The ball carrying abilities of him, the ball winning abilities of him. I think he kicked 3 points. It might have been, he was outstanding. The keeper as well, Galligan, was very good with his kickouts. And Monaghan in the first half with the wind, I mean, McManus could really shoot from anywhere. He kicked a couple of lovely scores. But in the second half, his in front of goal. I think he kicked a couple of really bad wides, a couple of bad wides from a free. He dropped a couple of balls in front of goal. He was really, really poor second half. And they sort of, if you like, over-relied on him. McCarron came off. Jack McCarron, a huge loss for them coming off, and you'd wonder what was going on there. And they just sort of, Monaghan, if you like, just didn't play, didn't attack the game. And I think a lot of it comes down to Desi Ward. He was coming through on goal. He fisted it over the bar where he had a good shot at goal. I know we've had this debate before, Dan, me and you. I had a debate with a couple of lads from college about it. In that situation, I would personally be instructing my player, go for a goal, kill the game. A point there is not going to cause a huge amount. I think there are 4 or 5 points up. If that goes to 8, all of a sudden, Cavan have a mountain to climb rather than a hill. And I would that's what, and I'm not sure, you can't blame Desi Ward because this, if you like, should be ironed out by the management at the start of the year. If you're going through on goal, you're 4 points up with 25 minutes to go, what you do, I'd be going for goal. Look, Dan, I know your opinion at times is different on it.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's game situations for me, so it's like I do think a 2-point lead, say let's make up a few examples here. 2-point lead, 3 minutes to go, you fist it over, you make it 3 points. I think, possibly even a 3-point lead making a 4-point lead. A 6-point lead making a 7-point lead with the certain amount of time left in the game. It is tough, like, because I would have been a couple of years back, always go for goal. I do think it's important fist and point. I don't think you can underestimate momentum of a score and momentum of a save in Gaelic football. Like, it's huge. Like, we both play games where games are going against you. It's amazing how big a factor momentum is. If you hit a wide or kick a ball short to a keeper, how big a moment that is. So to miss a goal chance as well is probably the worst. Particularly, like, you get rebounded, they go up the pitch, it's a 4-point lead where you're guaranteed the point. To me, it depends on situations. I think that's probably a harsh situation to be saying go for goal. I do think at times, if anything within the first 15 minutes of a game, you could make the argument go for goal. But at the same time, like, fisted points are huge. Fisted points are huge, and like I said, the momentum of getting a score to me is sometimes a bit bigger, and the risk of a save is probably why managers go for that approach more often than going for goals.
Yeah, like a lot of people are saying, Desi Ward, it's not on Desi Ward. He's a cornerback. He had a really good game. He's made an unbelievable run to get up there. It's a decision I hope has been made in January or February or whatever time they've sort of come to the conclusion of this. I think you have to go for goal there. I mean, if you're coming down the side and there's sort of, you have to make a decision whether to pass it left or pass it right, and maybe sometimes the best option is just to take the point, save the confusion. I mean, I remember I've been quite consistent on this. Dean Rock, do you remember that pass Conley gave? I think it might be in 2017, could be wrong, where Conley fizzed the ball in against Mayo. Chris Barrett makes a rash decision of tries to go for it. Dean Rock comes through on goal. He's got Mannion on his left, and he fists it over the bar. I mean, to be honest, I thought it was a poor decision by Rock. I think the game gets killed there, and then I think Dublin won that game by a couple of points, so it hasn't really affected the result, if you like. But I would always think you just got to kill the game there. I mean, especially in those conditions, if you get a goal against, especially the way Monaghan were playing, they were not attacking the game. They were not creating much. Every time they seemed to get up there, there was all, if you like, making mistakes. In the last few minutes of a game, if you get up the other end, you keep yourself in it, you're going to get a free and you're back begging. So I just think you've got to go for a goal there, go for the juggler, win the game there and then. And it wasn't even that hard a chance. I don't think. There wasn't a defender in his way and he had to run around him. The defender was kind of making the decision and he just, if you like, took the point. But I would always be going, bang, go for the juggler, get it past the keeper. And the game's, the game's there and there. If you like, one, there's that momentum you get from it, and you've got to attack the lead in Gaelic football. You can't let it simmer like that. God knows what's going to happen in those conditions. A ball could fall down in the goal and just gets put it in. I think you just got to go for the juggler there and take the goal.
Yeah, like, I suppose you have been consistent on that. We had a club game where I think we're 6 up, and we had someone to take the point. I think at the time it was a huge score to get to the 7, but we ended up drawing or losing the game. I can't think it was a 1-point loss or whatever, but I don't know. I think that was more kind of hindsight. I still think it was the right decision to take that point. We were now 3 scores up, as opposed to go for the goal, potentially miss, they go up the other end and score 5. But I do take your point. There are certain situations. Oh, look, I'll be more frustrated than anyone when someone doesn't go for a goal. Don't get me wrong. I do just think there are certain situations where you do take the point. But again, I take your point. Excuse the pun for that.
The only time I would sort of make allowances for it, is if you're dominating the game and you're sort of, if you're like 2 points down, or you're 2 points up and you're really on top, and you think you can win the next kick out and you think you can drive on. Monaghan were in their shell. They sort of broke. This is sort of what every team should be thinking to do if they're going to sit in like that and sort of, in football terms, park the bus or protect what they have, or not commit. Then once you do break that line and once you do get a runner in and you're through, you've got to go for it. You can't just take a point, because you don't know how many more times you're going to be able to break down the cabin defense. It's different. Like I said, maybe that opportunity in that club game, I think we were on a run of a couple of good scores. Maybe you could allow it. Personally, I think you should be going for goal in that situation. And that's the only time that I would make some sort of allowances for it. If you're 2 points down and, a miss at that stage in the game could be really costly. But when you're winning, you've got to attack the lead. You've got to really attack, and kill the game before Calvin get a sniff, especially in those conditions. Yeah, people are going to say, oh, a point's huge in those conditions. I mean, 113 was scored at full time. I mean, the scoring was all right because of the wind, because of the fouls that were made. And yeah, I think we could sit here all day talking about it.
Yeah.
But I think
I'll happily do that as well. But look, don't get me wrong. There's nothing more frustrating when someone takes the right option, goes for goal, and just hits the post. They're unlucky, and everyone's shouting, "Why don't you fist it over the bar?" That's pure after timing. So I agree. I'm not saying I'm actually on your side for most of this, but I do think there are certain situations. For example, that 6 point up in the club game to go 7 up, that 3 points up to go 4 points up. The problem with this, it's a lot of it based on what happens after, isn't it? And there's a lot more factors come into that. And a lot of it's based on whether you score the goal as well. But like I said, a goal is huge. I'm not underestimating that. A goal is sometimes worth a lot more than 3 points in terms of momentum. So
yeah, and I'm not blaming Desi Ward for the loss, because it's like I said, if you're an inter-county manager, you have these things ironed out. It's also the red card that was given to the Monaghan player. I'll just get his name up, I forget it, but I mean, that is criminal. It was an off the ball incident. The game is in the balance. 15 on 14 is a completely different ball game, and it's just stupidity, and especially considering it was off. And you've got to be really, really worried for him going into this month, thinking about that the whole time, and the fact they lost as well. It's a disappointment. So you just hope that the lads get around him, and congrats to Cavan, and then all of a sudden, Mickey Graham barred the relegation this year, and you can excuse it for the stop-start nature, has done a relatively decent job at Cavan, moving on from Mullinachta. And to be honest, I thought it was probably the game of the weekend. It sort of gave everyone that excitement for Gaelic games being back. I thought it was the first game where there was a little bit of bite, if you like. There was a high intensity, and it sort of fed off, and sort of started the championship in earnest, really.
And your thoughts on the winning free kick to win it? I thought it was absolutely sensational. Just the way they cruised the ball over the bar, like I struggled to do that from 25 meters off the ground. So
yeah, and Beggins was the same into the wind, and also Beggins should have kicked the one before it that McManus missed the normal time to win it. And I was screaming at the telly, why isn't Beggin kicking it? You've more of a chance, especially with the wind. It's a lower ball flight. It's not too far that he has to really put his boot through it. He sort of just glides it out the front of his boot. And the small margins like that, if that point goes over in injury time, we're talking about Monaghan going in on into Ulster. Gallagher's kick is unbelievable. You just you sort of have to get the distance, if you like, but it's all about accuracy, and if it bounces anywhere in and around the square, you could get something out of it. And it's a monster kick, and probably, to be honest, what Cavan deserved. I know a lot of people are saying Monaghan threw it away, but I thought Cavan had that game under control. They had some standout scores, and let's not forget the win-back score. I forget his name as well. The one with the outside was boot. I mean, to try that in those conditions is sensational,
wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think Tiernan McCann must have watched the Cavan game the day before, because he went for a point like that, and it scuffed wide. But it was just an unbelievable score, and maybe
he didn't even kick it. He almost just, you know what I mean? Like, it was pretty. That was amazing.
Especially with the wind, when the wind's kind of swirling, and you're kind of kicking it in and across. I mean, the skill of it is unbelievable. And maybe we're seeing, where lads have had 3 months off, 4 months off, we're locked down and they're practicing their kicking in the club championship. Maybe we're seeing a lot more, skill and ability and expressing yourself more and more being shown. And it was an unbelievable kick. And I thought Cavan deserved a full credit to them.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Dublin Hurlers. Very frustrating team to follow over the last few years. They always seem to, like, Jesus Christ, like give a team like Kilkenny a 15-point lead and nearly win it. At the end, they got it back to level. What were your thoughts on Dublin Hurlers? They still have a chance with the qualifiers, which in the madness of it all, I was watching a lot of the games on silence. I'd actually nearly forgotten. Football's knockout, but hurling has the qualifier system as well. I think Dublin got drawn against Cork there this morning, so that'd be a tough game. But actually Dublin nearly be backing themselves to win that game. What are your thoughts on Dublin Hurlers overall and the performance? Because you were watching the game.
Yeah, Kilkenny are going to pose a real threat. But I think it was 6 or 7 points. I think it was 6 points in 35 minutes, and then they got a free in extra time in the first half. I mean, that's not good enough if you want to win a game of hurling. And whatever about conceding, I think it was 2-12 at half time or something. You can't score 7 points. Donald Burke missed a lot of frees. There was a lot of pot shots. There was bad decision making. You could argue Matty Kenny got the side wrong. He left. He started Liam Rush ahead of Ronan Hayes from Kilmacud, and I thought that was an interesting decision. Yeah, Rushy, an all-star player, an unbelievable hurler, great player for Dublin over the years. He didn't start last week. You could argue, was there enough running in his legs? He's Matt Sharp, and he went with JB Keogh inside as well from Thomas Davis, who's a lot more smaller, not a huge ball winner, if you like, in the air. He's not going to cause the Kilkenny backs too much problems in that sense. And I just think he might have got that decision wrong, because every time the ball went into the Dublin forward line, it seemed to come out with the likes of Porrick Walsh and Hugh Lawler and Deegan for Kilkenny. Just seemed like they had so much time on the ball to clear it. And I think that the third goal is the sucker punch on the stroke of half time. I think that's sort of almost, if you like, naiveness from Dublin. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they just got a point. They had kind of had the ball in the Kilkenny area. That kind of had that game, if you like, under control, heading towards half time, and a long ball gets punted down. I think Walter Walsh gets in on it, or Fenley, and the ball's in the back of the net, and it's 3-12 to 7 points, and the game is, like I said, it's effectively over. And that sort of that lack of game management, that you'd be really disappointed if you're Matty Kenny. 2 goals, you can sort of crawl back. That extra goal is an absolute sucker punch. But the second half display was spirited and spearheaded by bringing Trollier in, Eamon Dillon and Ronan Hayes, and sort of just, if you like, going old school and lumping it in on the 2 full forwards inside. They Chris Crummy in there, and all of a sudden you have a real threat, because you've got real genuine ball winners. I mean, Ronan Hayes and Eamon Dillon aren't going to win every single ball. I mean, if the ball comes in low, chances are Walsh, Deegan, Lawler are going to come out with it, and they're going to start the attack again. But if the ball comes in high and they win it, I mean, there's a serious goal threat there. And we saw with Hayes' goal kind of started it. Crummy's goal is an unbelievable piece of skill. When Burke has a shot, it's saved, and it's sort of the quick reaction. And you know what you're going to get from Eamon Dillon. A couple of his points were outstanding. And me and Dad here were watching the game on the laptop, and Dad had kind of sat down to watch the end of the Cork Waterford game, and I had the laptop in front of me, and every now and then I'd be saying, "Oh, there's another score, and it's down to 6, and then it's down to 4." And it was an unbelievable comeback, and really they should have got extra time out of it. And again, Kilkenny, maybe they stopped hurling, missed 5 or 6 so uncharacteristically wide efforts. And it's sort of code. You would be drilling that into them, that if they do that against the Limerick, or they do that against a Tipperary or a Cork, who knows, they won't be able to do that. And if they do that in the Leinster final against Galway, they'll get punished. And I suppose that's what Cody will be drilling in. But Dublin, there was a couple of really bad performances by Dublin players, and if be interesting to see for the Cork game, does Matty Kenny make a few changes?
Well, just on his few changes, I still find it very surprising that only 2 Coola lads started from his Coola All-Ireland winning team. Do you know what I mean? I still find it a bit odd that they hasn't been able to incorporate more of those players. Do I have like loads of examples of players? Probably not. Cian O'Callaghan has started, Sean Moran started. You could argue Sean Brennan could potentially be there in goal. You could argue, David Tracy's not playing at the moment. What are your thoughts there? And am I kind of overthinking that? I've been watching it for a while and just expecting more Coola names, just looking at the starting 15.
maybe you can make a point maybe for Sean Brennan at times. Nolan's puck outs,
I don't think he's been great
maybe
now, Alan, over the last couple of years. I think there's been a
yeah,
couple of mistakes. I think he's been
yeah.
very, very good and then has the mistake in him, which I guess Matty Kenny's happy to accept.
And we didn't win a huge amount of puck outs now. Whether that's the strike and whether it's the Kilkenny team swarming us, you could say maybe there could be more cooler players, but I thought Sean Moran was horrendous. If really, he's one of he's Coola's best hurler, if you like. He's one of Dublin star hurlers. And in the game against Laois last year and in the game against Kilkenny this year, he hasn't played well at all, and he's really disappointed. And I wasn't surprised to see him taken off. And Jake Malone came on from. That'd be an interesting thing whether he sticks with Sean Moore in midfield. I mean, he's been centre back for Coola, he's been centre forward for Coola. Whether he sticks with him at midfield for Dublin, I'm not sure. Dara Gray, I thought, was okay at centre back from Whitehall. And maybe there is more changes to be made, and maybe there is more, if you like, the Coola guys coming in. Conor Callahan's a huge part of what Coola do anyway. And when you're not starting him, you could argue maybe Shute could come on, but even when Shute did come on, I think he lost the ball gave away a free for TJ Reed's point at the end, I think down towards the last couple of minutes. So, these sort of things happen. And, I think that the problem necessarily isn't the players, it's sort of making sure that the system's in place, and maybe having that sweeper. And Conor Burke from St. Vincent's did really well when they went back on him, and Owen O'Donnell went on to TJ Reid, won a couple of huge balls in the second half. That sort of when you're trying to break a comeback, and you've got it to 5 or 6 points, the next point is the biggest, if you like, and breaking up the play and winning it and getting another point or a goal is what fueled the comeback. But whether he adds a few more players in, whether they're from Coola, whether Trollier starts, whether Ronan Hayes, you'd imagine, would start after his cameo, whether he starts Liam Rush again, I'm not sure. But it's a big chance for Cork, because it's almost like they've had the couple of warm up games in the sense against Laois and Kilkenny. They've been okay for parts of it, and they should really be ready for this Cork game. And Cork were pretty poor against Waterford. And what Cork want to do? They want to win frees in areas for Pat Horgan to just pop them over and, leave him one-on-one with a defender in there and create. And maybe the only thing for Dublin is, Donald Burke, who was so good against Laois, missed a couple of bad frees, a couple of wides in general play. And whether David Tracy comes in and takes the frees, I'm not sure whether he'll change Donald Burke at this time, heading into the Cork game. But yeah, there's certainly decisions to be made for Maddie. And I think if he can make sure that Pat Horgan and the likes of Harte and Lahan aren't left, one-on-one inside, and Conor Burke can be back there sweeping. Because if it is one-on-one, I think, more often than not, that the quality of the inter-county hurler is going to score goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And Limerick were very impressive as well, beating Tip. But we're going to try and get on the air. We've got about 3 minutes, which was probably not going to happen. But the Six Nations final weekend, we're going straight to the Ireland game here, so we cut out all the mess and the small talk. What were your thoughts on Johnny Sexton's reaction coming off? He always has that reaction. I just think in a big game like that, it wasn't good enough for Irish as captain. I think people are kind of divided on that. It's great seeing a player so passionate. Don't get me wrong. Johnny Sexton's been one of our best out halves. What were your thoughts on his reaction? As a manager, I know if you're managing that, you'd be like, where do you go? Where do you go there? Like, he knows all the cameras are on him. It's frustrating. Jesus Christ, we've all been taken off, but this is a massive game. I guess he's probably never been taken off in a situation where we maybe needed him, where a lot he might have been taken off when we're winning. But I just thought it wasn't good enough. I don't know what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I think something similar. That there's a couple of other examples. Conor Murray gets taken off. Necessarily Ireland weren't playing well, so when Ireland aren't playing well, you've got to change it up. Conor Murray, I don't think the camera panned on him for too long. He didn't really kick up a huss or a fuss. If you take, games in football, when a player gets subbed off after 70 minutes, like Alexander Lacazette in the Arsenal game gets subbed off, the manager is almost preempting that, because he knows that's his job. He's done his job. He's off. Bring on fresh legs. And if a player can't buy into that in the team, especially when Johnny Sexton's the captain, the most experienced player, he has to be held accountable for his kicks. I mean, a few of his kicks didn't reach touch. He went for the corner instead of going for the post. I mean, like, I was sitting there going, like, I mean, is this a debate? Why are we going for what Ireland was so obsessed with winning by 6, and everyone was so obsessed by winning by 6. You can't win by 6 if you lose the game. Just win the game. right? Be 2 points up with 2 minutes to go, and all of a sudden you're still in the game. Ireland needed to still be in the chance of winning the Six Nations with 10 minutes left. Don't be worried about, oh, if we score 4 tries, it doesn't matter how much we win by, or we need to be 4 points up. Just be in the game with 10 or 15 minutes to go. Anything can happen. France will sort of slump because they'll know they can't win the Six Nations. A little bit of steam will go out from there, and Ireland, should have still been in the game. And I think, and we said it, that, for as well as Connors and Stanler and Doris and guys like this had done in the forwards for Ireland, that little bit of experience was lacking for that. And, Matt Williams said on Virgin Media, if, Rory Best was there, or Paul O'Connell, or even Peter O'Mahony, who, Peter O'Mahony plays, he never lets you down, Peter O'Mahony, in those kind of games. He would have slapped Johnny Sexton and said, take the points. Let's get in a point down. We're still in this, right? We can still win the game. Let's win the game before we win by 6. And I just thought, like, even at half time when the pundits and Alan Quinlan were saying, Ireland were the better side. I mean, when you have the majority of possession and you're losing because of 2 defensive errors, I don't know if you're the better side necessarily. You got to give France a bit more credit. Defensively, I thought France were really, really good. And then, look, we spoke about, the fullback position. Jacob Stockdale as a winger is defensively poor. I'm not sure. He's played fullback for Ulster. People seem to kind of shoehorn him in there. It makes no sense that Simon Zebo is
Yeah, I was
not
going to
playing.
say, if only we had a player, a European Champions Cup 2 tries in the final sort of player who could fit in there and a fullback maybe at the peak of his career. Do we have anyone like that?
It beggars belief that the ball gets, and there were so many defensive errors by France, just getting in behind us, if you like, where if you had a Zebo, and in fairness to Rob Kearney, that's sort of what he was known as, those last ditch tackles, those ball wins in the air, or sort of reading the danger. And Stockdale is still young in that sense. He's sort of new to the fullback position, but just a couple of those basic errors from Ireland. I mean, the handling, the penalties at the breakdown, the discipline. Sexton. I mean, Sexton sets the trend there by not going for the post. I mean,
he's 35. Is there an argument that he should be phased out before the World Cup, or are we keeping him for
yeah, because
what's the crack here? Like,
I think the thing with Ronan O'Gara is, O'Gara probably got phased out early because everyone knew Sexton. This guy is, he's shooting the lights out for Leinster. He's got he's been understudy to Contepomi at Leinster. This guy is going to be world class. There's no one there at the moment. I mean, at times they played Jack Harte from Connacht, who, was okay. Munster have always struggled with that out half in recent times when they've had, people thought Tyler Blendendahl was going to be unbelievable. Then he had, I think, that semi-final in the European Cup where nothing went for him. And there's no one really breaking it down. And
well, there's obviously Joey Carby, but with his injury at the moment.
So. Yeah, and like I said, he's been injured at times. He hasn't really, necessarily taken the shirt off Sexton, if you like. And you want someone, for as much as Sexton does well, to take the jersey off him and sort of make him a better player for another year or so. And yeah, I think if he's going into the next World Cup, I think there could be huge issues for Ireland. And when a player's been there so long, he's seen so much, he's been a part of so many different teams, then you're kind of relying on different standards to drive it. But I still think that that pack, that forward line, I think there could have been at least one experienced player put into it, because it's for as well Connor's played, he played it against Italy, and it's just a different challenge going to France. I know there's no fans there, but they bring a different level of intensity. It's a different beast. And maybe the cool head of O'Mahony, look, it's all hindsight, but the cool head of O'Mahony in there with a point to prove. I mean, he's the kind of lad that never let you down. CJ Stander was unbelievable. I mean, he was, I think, by far Ireland's best player. He was absolutely the bull he is. But at fullback, that there's always going to be issues when Simon Zebo's not playing, and Gary Ringrose another huge loss. And look, you can say that all you want, but Ireland didn't deserve to win the Six Nations. They got battered in Twickenham, and they're really disappointed in France. And they had the wrong game plan, or whether it was set from the manager, the players. I mean, whenever you need to win by just win the game first. Make sure you win the game, and you're still in the game with 10 minutes to go. And Ireland were gone and buried really just after half time.
That's it, Sean. We've got in around the hour, and we're going to try and get better at trying to get under the hour, but we're or get as less as possible. A lot to cover there this weekend. We've Masters preview for golf fans. We didn't quite get to Harrington's performance in Bermuda there, tied 26th. We got the Masters preview coming Tuesday week with Malachy Kirkin of the Irish Times. That's actually going to be a Facebook Live and Twitter Live and YouTube Live at 11 a.m. Tuesday. Be open your podcast feeds later on that day as well. So we'll have a bit of crack with that. Any comments? Masters preview. It'll be Roy McIlroy, a lot of Roy McIlroy talk, Bryson DeChambeau talk. Guess we'll have to mention Tiger Woods as well, Sean, at some point. We've actually got a brilliant interview on Wednesday. Sean did in one of our series of one-to-one interviews with Peter Blexley, and that'll be in your podcast feeds on Wednesday. Brilliant chat, Sean, wasn't it? And just you guys covered a lot.
Yeah, and I suppose anyone that's ever been interested in sort of policing of football games and, you know, hooliganism and racism and stuff that has happened in English football, if you like. I spoke to Peter, who was a former undercover detective for Scotland Yard, and an author, broadcaster. A lot of people might remember him from The Hunted, and we also spoke about his current mission, which is to find a fugitive, someone wanted in connection with a double murder, two murders rather, at Kevin Powell. And he's a huge sport fan, Peter, and it was like, honestly, it was an unbelievable chat. He's one of the most honest guys I've come across, and so open with me. And make sure to listen to it if you're interested in all that side to sport, really, if you like hooliganism, racism, all that kind of idea and what's wrong with modern sport.
Absolutely, yeah. We got a great reaction then from our Premier League predictions last week. It looks like Doug's going to win unless Sean can dig out a correct score, and we'll have a bit of crack with that on Thursday. I guess, you know, Premier League predictions is great. We do manage to cover every single team based on that, so there isn't in this case of talking about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer for 45 minutes, which I'm sure we'll be able to. But listen, we really appreciate listening. Get us on social media at Tackling Sport, and we'd really appreciate a review on Apple if you're listening there, and everywhere else, please follow and subscribe. So all that's left to say is goodbye from Sean.
Right.
Goodbye from myself. We'll have an episode out Wednesday and Thursday. Otherwise, have a great week. Thanks for listening.
It's long a fall.